Sono orribile. Non so se... Okay. Good morning to everybody. I don't know if you can hear me. I will just ask you to give the confirmation that you can hear me. Yep. Okay. Good morning to everybody and welcome back. So it's my pleasure to open this second panel of this day of study. So we will approach now the field of arts, museum, and cultural heritage. And in particular, this section is dedicated to the impact of art in our social life, especially now in the age of digital revolution. So as all of us know from school as well as from our daily life, art has always been part of society since the very beginning, and at the same time, it changes as much as society changes. So what we would like to highlight today is how art deals with the public dimension, and by converse, how public dimension, which means our society, deals with art. And also, which is the relation between art and digital experiences, or how can art deal with a very new public like new digital generations? And what about museums and galleries? So in this regard, let's start with the first speaker. First, I would just like to remind our participants that they can write in the chat to ask the floor. They can do it already while our speakers are talking. And so we will have like a first list to follow later in the time for discussion. I remind also the speakers that they have 20 minutes, so please stay in those 20 minutes. And finally, that later a 30-minute discussion will take place at the end of the 2 papers of the day. So I'm glad to introduce Professor Silvia Mazzucotelli Salice.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So Silvia Mazzucotelli Salice is a cultural sociologist who carries out didactic and research activities with attention to the issues of art and culture and to their interaction with urban transformations. She currently works as a lecturer in cultural sociology at Faculty of Political and Social Sciences at Catholic University in Milan. Within the same university, she's member of the steering committee of Moda Cult Center for the Study of Fashion and Cultural Production. She also has a courtesy appointment in the Arts and Crafts Research Center. And to date, she has found the investigation of social construction of public space, which is a rich site for sociological inquiry. She's author of articles and international academic papers on the interplay between art and the humanities. And on these, she wrote the book Arte Pubblica, Artisti e Spazio Urbano in Italia e Stati Uniti for Franco Angeli Editors, Milano. So, Professor Mazzucotelli, I leave you the floor. Thank you very much for being here, for presenting your talk entitled Distant Form of Participation in Art, Public Art as Instance of Territorial Formation in the Pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paola, for this introduction. It was really exhaustive, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited because it's a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to talk about the interactions, and I like to use this word, especially today, between the arts and public space, because I think that public art gives us the opportunity to talk about how social life and the arts have always been intrigued, has always been crossed together. But today we have the opportunity to talk more about the uses of art in the social life. I start just sharing my screen, and I hope that I will be able to do everything properly. Stop. So do you see my presentation? Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. So the very first thing first that I want to say is why to talk about social life and art with the pandemic. The coronavirus was basically a storm. Someone defined it as the perfect storm. And the storm because it challenged beliefs that we always took for granted. For example, separation between work and life and daily life, home and work, or the right to the health, how we everyday work. Now we are working from home. It's nice because it's very intimate. Even as a conference, we are entering each other's home. So we are basically entering an intimate space. And this was something we never saw before. But it also demonstrated that a system that we perceived as consolidated before, as stable and organized, maybe not perfect, but stable at least, was not stable at all. In the blink of an eye, everything changed. Supply and demand, goods and services, health and globalization, borders and intelligence. But above all, changed the public space. Culture and artistic project. Culture and art in general are the great forgotten when we talk about coronavirus, because museums, cinema, and theaters, even now that we are thinking about how to support this initiative, are basically at least in my opinion, they seem to be getting the short end of the stick. Perhaps this is due to the difficulties of thinking these sectors in a post-COVID-19 scenario, because since they are public activities, they attract crowds. Or perhaps it is because they are meant to attract only the elite. And so it's not, let's say, fair to talk about elite initiatives. But it is important, I said, to talk about the arts and about another element that is intersecting the art nowadays, that is the public space. One thing about this moment is that we are starting to see just how important it is to use and to have a public space. For those who have always have a public space, the infrastructure seems to be something given. But the pandemic has brought new idea of public space. With no vaccine or cure available for the pandemic, physical space has become the mechanism to fight, prevent, control the spread, while providing intrinsic benefit these places offer. I want to share this picture with you. Since the pandemic boom in spring 2020, cities were put to the test, emptied by the social light that has always represented their vital force, for public space were reduced to empty areas, spaces in hibernation. This is Milan, and this in Milan was frighteningly evident. Overnight, Piazza Duomo sat empty. Navigli Quintessential Cafe closed up, and Corso Como nightlife went completely dark. Images of ghost cities and streets and neighborhood flooded the news and social media as people were suddenly forced to reconsider their relationship to public space. Social distance dictated by COVID-19 health emergency has affected access to public space, and within it, creating a range of impacts on different levels. While global lockdown destabilized the economy and challenged country leaders, at the human level, the pandemic generated and is still generating isolation and loneliness. Everyone is asked to stay home and rearrange daily routine and work activities indoor in domestic space, looking at the world from behind a window. And I want you to concentrate on this word, behind a window or from a balcony. Yet, albeit with some precaution, the social life of city continues and has continued even in spring. From cities to small town, in Italy in particular, different areas demonstrated their great ability to adapt. And the city of Milan in particular proved to be creative, artistically creative, and vital, even in the time of a pandemic. So, what happened, for example? Outdoor condominium cinemas, concerts from balconies, concerts from windows, flash mobs. All these initiatives, of course, were taking place because we needed social life. So what happened in March? I started with my students of the MA in Communication for Creative Industry to catalog, to have a sort of archive of all these initiatives. And I'm going to show you some of them. The first slide is the outdoor cinema of a condom. And this was very particular in Milan because the city of Milan is famous for the Case di Ringhiera, raining houses, the complexes with several apartments that have a big courtyard in the middle. And during the lockdown in March, this courtyard became basically the stage for concerts, but also for outdoor cinema, as the one that you can barely see in the picture in the slideshow. Balcony flash mobs. The courtyard has been transformed into the stage, and the balcony replaced the stalls of the theaters and the stands of the stadium. Several concerts took place. Probably some of you may probably imagine or remember the first guy that used to play with the saxophone on the window in Milan. After that, several other concerts took place, and I have to say that some of them were even fixed appointments. This is another example of social life. So two neighbors, they were having a lunch, basically, from one balcony to the other one. The idea is they were trying to invent a new public space. They were not allowed to go out, but they could stay on the balcony. And so there was an idea of a space not longer walkable, but remotely experienced. We have a video that has been probably all of you, I'm not sure, but you might know Casa Surace, that is a group of comics that basically try to make fun of some Italian attitudes, such as moving hands as I do. And they created this video about the typical lunches at Sunday. So we have no time to show it entirely, but I'm going to show you a short part of it. Let me know if you can see it. Okay, so just to show you, so basically we're enjoying the Sunday lunch all together. Another example, this is an experience a student of mine recorded, happened in Pistoia, so not in Milan, but in this town. An outdoor condominium tombola was organized, and I'm showing you how they organize it. So basically they were telling the numbers from the balcony, and they were playing with neighborhood were the neighbors that were living next to, or not even next. They had really to yell in order to play it all together. 22, cioè 22? A Vallera. Okay. This temporary initiative, I know, they may seem frivolous or even futile, while especially in the nearby cities of Bergamo and Brescia, it was hard to keep track of the death, while the shocking images of the long column of military vehicles loaded with coffins of fallen soldiers in the battle against coronavirus were turning up. There was no lack of criticism for this initiative, I want to say, and I understand this. Death deserves respect and even silence. However, as a sociologist, I cannot help but wonder what the profound meaning of these appointments was, beyond the entertainment, why people were finding themselves on the balconies. Some became a regular appointment, others have remained impromptu events, but this is of little importance. What should be noted is that all this practice sought to design a new public space, no longer walkable, but remotely experienced through the arts and through the digital. But the challenge of keeping apart means also the public areas, such as park plazas, markets, and restaurants, experimented and are experimenting with the ideas that keep people safe. Often this is a challenge to be met with smart design that communicates the way that rules, expectations, or even purposes of a space have changed. As streets are reimagined, art becomes the tool to respatialize and resinify urbanities in the pandemic context. So now I want to show you some tactical uses of art in public space we recorded in our first analysis with my students. The first is painting social distance grids on the ground. Of course, this goes on the more general use of public art to mark a safe social distancing on public space. Another example is reimagining park spaces for other uses. This was especially important in Milan, where half of the people live in areas with minimal recreational space. So this led to the transition of the city toward a wider and more homogeneous supply of public space. But meanwhile, we had to think how to live in the public space we had. And so several activities took place: arts, theater, training, as you can see in the image. Of course, this raises concerns about the appropriation of public space for private use. But what is important for me as a sociologist is that all these practices that were bottom-up initiative led to the writing of a first document, Milan 2020 Adaptation Strategies, that consider the new use and the new management of public space outdoor as the key element to respond to the coronavirus. And in this document, artistic activities such as theater, such as cinema, such as concerts, such as art, such as public art play a great role. Another example of art is the use of art for local business. You know that small local business, small retail activities were suffering from the lockdown. So local associations are launching and supporting artistic programs that will provide funding for local artists to paint local storefront window. This will not provide artists with much needed work, but it will also create an outdoor self-guided art walk, drawing residents to local business and into a shared experience on sidewalk. This type of intervention also is not immune to criticism. First of all, it raises some perplexities about the role and the meaning of art. We are definitely experiencing the comeback of the much more visible end of the state in the art sector, which in the form of public intervention is now intervening in art, also in the sector of art. Which are the consequences we should ask ourselves? Is that the artistic void becoming too domesticated? We have no idea, but again, we have to think about this. Another example, protest or social artworks. In 2015, the city of Milan launched the Muri Liberi, a program that assigns to artists urban spaces for art for free. Since then, more than 100 walls were created and have been realized. And one of the districts in which most of the walls were realized is the Ortica district in Milan, in the eastern part of the city. And in this district, we saw new murals, new walls, even during the pandemic. The artwork served as a form of civil speech and as a strategy to remember the past in the struggle to create a future. The protest art became visible and a durable form of expression. It was a way to attune the anxiety surrounding being the public space during the COVID pandemic, and it represents also the repurposing of public space for popular expression. Moreover, just to connect with the digital, many of these art pieces incorporate hashtags. Although it is impossible to click on the painted walls, these references link a particular street, a particular corner, a particular system to an ongoing vibrant movement that is basically global. And so it creates a connection between the local and the global. And what do these experiences tell us? While museums and galleries have been forced to keep their door closed, art progressively occupied public spaces. Imagine it as known places. Imagine as ghostly spaces, sometimes temporarily. And at the same time, digital media allowed people to live a shared experience of these spaces. Just to conclude, which are the takeaways that we, as me and my students are working on, departing on this large observation? First, one of the consistent themes that has emerged from this qualitative observation of the interaction between art, culture, and public space is that in the context of COVID-19, a common sense that public space need not to be permanently fixed to a particular locality was emerging. Rather than something drawn in ink onto a static city map, space can move and evolve over time, and art can become the tool to indicate the new and the changed uses of this space. Secondly, we need artists now more than ever. Public spaces and public art play a crucial role as far as they are able to create community connection. They, within the artistic and the creative community, the dynamic and collaborative ideas are in abundance, and in some way they were able to offer not common responses to how to use the public space. Connectivity is essential. As I showed you before, walls and disused urban spaces became, for example, the case of the social walls, are becoming a spatial claim, interconnecting through the digital and non-digital instruments, connecting the urban areas with the people who live there. Another point, the next phase of recovery will probably occur in public space. If we intend to redesign our public space to be more resilient, adaptable, and attuned to the new needs of residents, public makers must incorporate the voices of artists, artisans, and other creatives since the very beginning. Another point, these represent a fertile moment of experimentation. And it's a unique moment of experimentation. We have the opportunity to bring the art into the space and to show the importance of the intersection between aspects of our social life that usually we do not think as connected. And finally, think global and local. This experience gives us the opportunity to realize that all the local activities can be connected to a more global world. And in the time of the pandemic, this represents, of course, a very intriguing point. We have a few questions, though. As such, the contribution trying to answer is the digital experience a mutilated experience with respect to the concrete relationship between art, public, and charity? So is this experience in which we were not able to really go out and to experience this artistic activity in the outside, but just from the balcony or from our phones or from our computer? Is this really different in terms of perception? Probably not. What we saw with my student is that from the people point of view, there was no different perception of what they were seeing from the balcony and what they were seeing from their mobile phone. More than ever, online and offline were connected. It was even sometimes impossible to get from people's voice the difference between connection, online connection, and offline perception. They were talking about these experiences as they were living them in a new public space. And I think that this is one of the most important outcomes of this first qualitative analysis that we have been doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mazzucotelli. It was a really interesting paper. So I just ask to everyone to turn off the microphone if they are not talking. In so doing, we will avoid problem of connection. So let's now introduce our second and third speakers, which will present their paper jointly. So Carlo Corsato and Kate Devine. So Carlo Corsato is a specialist on early modern art and architecture. He currently works at National Gallery of London as a gallery educator, where he develops learning sessions and activities to promote inclusion and access to the wider range of audience. He also works with the Royal Observatory in Greenwich as a learning coordinator. And finally, he is a lecturer at Morley College of London. He also lectured at the universities of St. Andrew and Buckingham. Kate Devine, our second speaker, she's a PhD student at Royal Holloway University of London, working on a thesis on crafts in Italian and art design. She works at Royal Academy of Arts as educator and as a workshop leader. At present, she's also a gallery educator at the National Gallery of London. She writes for Tate Gallery as well. And in 2015, she was the curator of the exhibition Private Lives Public Space at the Fiumano Gallery. So I'm glad to thank our speakers for being here, for presenting their paper entitled Digital Divide, Diversity and